Just starting the live, get my notes. Hi everybody, I'm just getting ready. We're just sort of inviting everybody out and the information's going out. Hello, hello. If you can hear me, please give me a thumbs up and then I'll get our special guest connected in for tonight's chat. I've also got a bit of a dry sore throat, so I'm going to try my best. Anyway, I'm going to get our guest connected up now and then I'll introduce him. Hi Tony, hi Matt, hi everybody. So I've got a thumbs up, fantastic, here we go. Let's get this person connected in. Hopefully he'll be able to connect in soon. Hello everybody. Doing fantastic. Just waiting for our guest to connect in now. I've just sent the invite through. Ooh, mysterious. We'll see. I mean, do any of you know who the guest is? Did you see the information that was up on my stories? Hi Jeff, I've just sent you the invitation to join. I'll just try and send that again. I'm glad everybody can hear me anyway, and I've got solid internet connection. Hello, Malaysia. Right, let me just try and get Jeff joined in. Jeff's sending you the invite now. .block.
Hello. That's it. Let's flip the camera.
Yep. Just getting the camera the right way.
Yep. I can see myself. Press this other mirror. See? Okay, I pressed it now. Go back. You got it? Good. Hi, you're hearing...
Hello. Right, so let me just introduce, welcome everybody, introduce yourself as well. So we have a very special guest today. I'm super excited. Super excited with this one. So this is the one, the only, the real Doc Block, also known as Dr. Jeff Block. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, how you doing, Mark? This is Peaches with
Fantastic.
She's a crowd. Well, if she starts to vocalize, we'll have to put her back. But in the meantime, she's pretty cool. Anyway,
What's her name?
Peaches. Isn't that
Peaches.
obvious? Here,
all right.
Let's see if I can't just come here. Come on up, girl. Come on.
So the people that are joining in, please, if you've got any questions, please ask them. We'll try to get through them, as I've got some questions anyway, but we'll try to navigate the questions through. Feel free to share it out amongst your friends, because I'm sure they may not all be aware that we've got a live with Dot Block. So get it shared out and get everybody joined on. So gorgeous contrast there. So obviously it's super dark here. I've got every spotlight on me to keep me lit up, and you're out there in some sunshine.
We're about 5 hours before you. It's 1 o'clock. I'm in Miami.
Yes.
And I'm sitting in a little shady area. I have a good friend of mine, Carlos, who's on the camera. Otherwise, the selfie stick would be hard to handle in controlling Peaches here. But we can talk. Yeah. Go ahead and let's.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So I've got a question straight away. The name Doc Block, some people may not be aware, but you are actually a doctor.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people who are considered doctors because anybody with a PhD is a doctorate. No, I'm what.
So what kind of doctor are you, and how does being a doctor connect with plants and everything like that in your life?
I'm a physician. I'm a medical doctor. I'm a board certified anesthesiologist. And so I'm trained actually from before medical school, which is at the University of Miami, almost graduating 40 years ago in a few months. But I'm also a chemist from Emory University back just before that. And so the way I look at plants and people is with that bias background as a medical doc and with a chemistry background. I think playing with plants, though, as a kid, before I went to medical school, is really still at the heart of what I like to do for caring for that. For the most part, the plants don't talk back either. She'll talk and human people will talk, but the plants really only talk with you if you know how to listen to what they're trying to say, like I'm hungry or I'm too wet or too dry. Those are clinical applications if I'm going to draw the person to plant parallel. And Peaches, you see, is the ham, so she'll steal the show.
Yeah, definitely.
And if she does that in my ear and the mic that's right here in my ear, I'll have to put her elsewhere or move. But I wanted to film this from here today with you guys because I'm sitting in a conservatory area. I've been here for 33 years, and so even behind me there's a living wall with some anthuriums that have taken pretty much 25 years to climb up to where the top of that wall is at 8 feet. Other things planted in the ground are in pots, and that gives me the benefit of time. And I think that's real helpful when you want to assess how your plants are doing, because some of these plants, especially anthuriums, are relatively slow growing. And that's probably why you don't see many of them in the big box stores. They take a while to get going, and they don't tend to grow from cuttings unless they're vegetative offshoots of the parent plant. So it's not like you can take a leaf, put it in the ground like a begonia or in a pot and get a new plant coming out of a leaf. So I think I've always enjoyed them because they're leathery, they're certainly tropical. They sort of, particularly the larger ones, screen out jungle. They're different than other aeroids, and I think they're a lot more, as I said, leathery. The substance of the leaf was fascinating. And I wanted plants that were durable years ago to start to play with, where I like hybridizing to make the plants into things that at least my eye sees as beautiful. And sometimes it's not always plain green. Sometimes it's a plant that the veins on it may be more pronounced or different than a plant that doesn't have contrasting veins. And for anthuriums, I found some years back that were pretty interesting to look at from the back side of the leaf, not something you see usually from when a plant's sold. So for all those reasons, I've grown these here for years as sort of a combined plant and people dock. But that's really not that different historically than healers in ancient times, is it? Because even in ancient times, the earliest of healers before there were medical schools, they had to be good in sustaining plants because that's where their formulary chemicals would have come from. Those plants that had therapeutic value were known in prehistoric times, and you had some people in given tribes that I guess were more accomplished at it than others, and it didn't matter if you were a guy or a girl. It wasn't like that. It was the people who knew somehow the secrets of plants to health and wellness. And that's sort of the reason that there's good overlap with what I like to do with tropical ornamentals that even extend to botanical medicines.
Is that a skill specific to you that you've retained and have that knowledge, or would you say that other physicians also have that kind of base knowledge to apply to plants, or they don't?
Well, any physician can, any person can. You don't have to be a doc to know that. For me, one of the sentinel moments in looking at plants and people, as far as how similar they are for their rooted, in a sense, molecules, were the molecules of chlorophyll. And that's obviously something that I had known about even as a kid, because it just came up when you do book research. There wasn't internet then. But I looked at a molecule of chlorophyll while I'm at Emory doing chemistry, and I said, oh, that's interesting, complicated and whatever. And then I go to medical school and they show me a molecule of hemoglobin, the lifeblood of people, versus, in a sense, the lifeblood of plants. Both chemicals, both molecules are the way that plants derive their energy, in this case from sunlight, that's what chlorophyll does, compared to hemoglobin, which is what carries the oxygen as your source of energy in all of us. The molecules are identical with one exception. Hemoglobin has iron that's part of it. That's why people with iron poor blood, or women when they're pregnant, you have to optimize hemoglobin to have a healthy person. Farmers would know that magnesium, if you know the chemistry, is at the center of chlorophyll, otherwise identical molecule to hemoglobin. But in chlorophyll, that magnesium allows the plant to fully function for photosynthesis, which it relies on for its food source, in a sense, or at least energy. So a farmer uses magnesium then the same way a physician uses iron. If you have a weak or stressed plant, like a weak or stressed human, make sure that the basic molecules of hemoglobin and chlorophyll are really having their full complement of magnesium or iron. So does that help sort of give you some parallels there, Mark? On
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really.
it's not to be too highbrow science for the listeners. I just want to tell you there are parallels with you biochemically that you'd be amazed if you understood how similar plants are in some respects.
Yeah. It's good thought. So obviously we know you mostly, I guess, for anthuriums. But what else do you have? What else do you care for? What else do you love? Because there's such a, I mean, it's definitely not a fake background behind you there, like you get on some Zoom calls. That's real. What other types of plants do you have and care for? And
Well,
why?
thanks.
Why do you like them?
Actually, what I'll do then is, as we're speaking, the friend of mine with the camera, he'll pan a little bit to maybe show you some other stuff too. So I like to grow almost everything that I can. But remember, I'm in Miami. I'm in the only real subtropical area of the continental United States. Now, Hawaii's different. Hawaii, you can grow things like this. But outside of here, in some certain places elsewhere in the country, rarely are people able to grow the great variety of things we have here. And that's actually representative of those latitudes throughout the world where most of the tropical plants are. There's so much more biodiversity in those areas. Evolution may even happen faster in those places because of how much there is, how fast the turnover is in warmer, more humid environments, say in areas that are relatively more arid or have what we call temperate, cooler climates. But
Yes.
I'm fortunate in Miami, orchids, bromeliads. I started with bromeliads as a plant group back in the early 1980s and had my first real collection of that because I like plants that show color, and my eyes are always looking for reds in particular, I think are showy. They pop across the
Yeah.
whole yard. I also like plants that when they do have a flower, the flower is not gone in a few days, or like a rose inside of a week. I like the idea that bromeliads and orchids in particular also have flowers that last a long time. The difference between orchids and bromeliads there is that I find that orchids are relatively ugly when they're not in flower. Bromeliads, such as those that are even behind me here, they can be kind of pretty and, exist
Ooh.
themselves. Aeroids
What's
are
the
everywhere.
anthuriums just there?
The anthuriums, let me see what we're filming. Down low, oh, that would be a
Yeah.
clarinervum, anthurium clarinervum. So, yeah, we're getting a little further away, so we'll come back now. But
Yeah.
when you're asking me, I'm not looking where the camera is as we're doing that. So we'll come back into view after showing you some stuff. By the way, the conservatory is a lot larger than the area I'm at now. So in a few
Yeah.
minutes, actually, when my bird gets back to where I'll put her so she's not hogging up the show, I'll show you some other areas indoors here. And,
Oh wow. Okay.
okay, so we'll be here for a little bit. Hey, come on back, Peaches. Oh, she's all right now. She's not
So
making
I've
too
just got
much
a
noise.
question asking about obviously you've got amazing. You were just talking about you've got amazing weather conditions, the longitude, latitude. Is that it? Is that what's optimal for the things that you're growing there? Are you having to do anything additional?
Well, there are really basically four things you got to consider. The temperature is only one of them. And yeah, our temperature constraints here are wonderful. I realize that I'm somewhat challenged to speak in terms of centigrade. We use Fahrenheit here. But let's just say that the temperatures that we have, especially this time of year, are not only comfortable for me outside dressed like this, but anthuriums would like them too. It's not even as humid. That's another variable, which is not, of course, temperature, but water. Humidity is essential for all plants, and that's why we're exploring the cosmos, looking for which places outside in the universe may have water. We understand life forms, whether plants or animals, as being dependent on that. So water is critically important. It's not just what you water the plant with, but the humidity that's in the air. So the next variable besides temperature and humidity or water really extends to airflow. Because Miami is wonderful. We're coastal. We have some of the cleanest air of any major metropolitan city in the country. And
Yeah.
because of that, our air quality is very important. And we have constant breezes that come from our south-southeast. That helps mitigate a heavy humidity-filled area where the airflow may help other pathogens or diseases, fungus, things like that, settle and form on plants. So the airflow is really important. Fans in greenhouses, of course, or even in those people who may be collecting in the listening audience today that you have inside your Mylar tents, that airflow is critically important. And of course, if
Yeah.
you're in a closed place like your tents, it's not only what comes in, but you got to have a way to let the air get out. So you exchange fresh air in during those times.
Yes.
So that's temperature.
So
We
this
have
behind me is all I
water.
have with my plants.
Well, where the
I have
camera is
2
now, I can't
fans.
see you, but I think
Oh
I
yeah, don't
can
worry about it.
imagine what it looks like. So in any event, we covered 3 things. I said there were 4. We covered, first of all, obviously the temperature we talked about and the Miami heat. We talked about the water. Some people talk it's not really the heat here, it's the humidity, but the water's humidity. The third we said was airflow. The fourth is actually light. And remember, that's another key variable. And the light where you are fluctuates more in the winter because the light's going to be coming from lower in the sky during your winter. The closer to the equator, the more it stays up. We're 12 hours of light and dark, but it means that at different times of the year, the light's not coming from a lower angle sun casting shadows. So the shadows that are cast, remember, you're not getting that light directly to where you want it to go to. And so for that reason, light becomes a variable that has seasonal application at the latitudes that you in the UK are, which is not that different from, say, New York and those latitudes. But down here where I am, latitude more like 26 degrees, is more subtropical, and that's why our light quality during most of the year is fairly impressive and helpful for most of these things. Because
Yeah,
remember,
definitely.
I said that light's the way the plants get their energy.
Well, I need some light. I need some energy. So I need a holiday in Miami or wherever it is that you are. I have got somebody's just asked a question, and it kind of leads on to a question that I've got ready, prepared for you. So recently, you were awarded the best new flowering plant at the Tropical Plants International Expo for your new bred anthurium, which is called Anthurium Michelle. Somebody has just asked, where did the name Zara come from? So for both of them, where did Zara come from and where did Michelle come from?
Well, let's start with Michelle, because what you said about it being new is not so at all. Anthurium Michelle, I've been working with in fine tuning it for 20 years, because that's when I met my wife, whose name is Michelle. So, you know, it gets the honor of her name, but it is not recent or new. It's taken 4 generations of breeding to get things fine tuned so that the Michelle I have now doesn't look like the plant that I would have an accession of over 30 years ago. Some people may have heard of that as under a name of Wonder Boy, but names aren't really the issue here. And I'll tell you about Zara in a moment, but I want to make a comment about names because not only as a physician, but as a collector, I want you to think a moment about how important names are. If I was to give you the scientific names, and I grow lots of plants besides anthuriums and aroids, palms is a good example. The taxonomists never get it right. Historically, they haven't. And over centuries, humans have tried to name plants until the plants say, well, we have exceptions, or you didn't quite understand it, or us right, if you're speaking from the plant's perspective. So plant names in palms, sometimes you'll have taxonomists, who are the people who officially assign names, take an entire genus of a plant, not just the one species, and put it in another group of plants, meaning we really don't know. That all changed about 20 years ago. Again, 20 years ago was a sentinel time because the first plant genome was figured out in 2003. And that was a sentinel moment because that really is what the plant is, not what you call it or I call it. Those are just names. And a lot of the names sometimes come labeled as NOID, NOID. It really means no ID, because you do have some official names, like the source plants that I've tended to like to breed with both Michelle and Zara, which, by the way, is the name of a friend's daughter. Those names of plants are nice for us to give them maybe as an attribution to somebody we know or love, but they really mean very little to the plant. As a matter of fact, as soon as I meet a plant that cares what the hell I call it, I'll let you know. So other than late for dinner, because if you really know plants and you listen to them in a sense, they'll tell you things, but they're not going to argue if you call them one name or another. The plant's just going to be there and do what plants do. And they really do some marvelous things. So that's a little nutshell, sort of maybe curmudgeonly comment on how I look at names of plants. but it's an important consideration for anybody out there who is actually looking to buy plants, because they're not infrequently misrepresented, and sometimes the name sells. And I'll tell you that in the future, when the registry of plants that's now being formulated through the International Aroid Society takes form, I promise you there will not be an Anthurium Doc Block or Dr. Block. That's a relatively ugly name compared to Michelle or Zara. So I wouldn't name a plant that, but because I gave people years ago some early plants that they may have then cultivated, they called it Doc Block. I meet people nowadays, and those giveaways were 20 or more years ago in some cases, and those were my castaways. Those weren't my prime breeding plants. Those were the things that didn't meet the standards or the specs I was looking to develop. So guess what? I gave something to a friend or things like that. For those people then to take my gift and then to market it and sell it with the name Doc Block, I was told about that only about a year ago. Somebody said, hey, Jeff, Google your name, Dr. Block, and the word anthuriums and see what comes up. And I saw it and I go, oh my God, really? Plants going for how much money? Because this is a concern. I'm saying, boy, the people out there, if they're going to pay that much for it, you would think that they would source the bona fide genetics, not the castaways that may have been given to somebody else years ago. So it's a little pushback, and I know this, but I figure if somebody's going to spend that much, they should be concerned with the real genetics there. And so actually, for the first time in my life, I stopped giving away plants. I've donated things. I've even bartered, okay? A lot of the different collectible things have been just from neighborly trades with other people who were doing this years back. But I had never sold a plant. And it was one of those maybe philosophical things. I was in the practice of medicine. It wasn't a money issue. It was really a fact that I had plants that I didn't think I truly owned. God owns them. So if I don't truly own them, who was I to sell them? Now the economy's changed, and there's another thing I want you to know about Michelle. Michelle and I have twin boys. They're only 17 years old. So I had to look and say, all right, I got kids ready to go to college. Should I maybe now consider selling a plant? And we decided, yeah, it's okay. Let's go ahead and do that. But again, even where the price points have been, I don't have anything to do with that. But the people who are truly brokering plants that I have really kind of strict orders. I don't want people to enter a plant that's a bona fide plant that I may start to make available at the high end of the market or low end, somewhere in the middle, just so that as this inflated market, and it is, anybody out there should recognize that, as it contracts, I don't chase an inflated market. I'd rather have the market be more discerning and then hopefully find what I'm offering as being hopefully a little bit more bona fide than what was out there a year or more ago.
It's really interesting to hear that obviously the focus is about the quality and the genetics. You know, I've seen, I don't know whether anyone else has seen it, the wonderful pictures of Michelle, the back, there's so much more to it than just the front leaf. There's the veining, the flower, it's amazing.
Well, there's another point though to how a breeder selects plants. And if you give me just a second, I'm going to move my location to go to another area where your viewers can also see, but it'll actually be a testament by seeing some larger plants, not the ones that are behind me, that might help. So give me a second so I can actually put Peaches back. Otherwise, she'll be chasing me here also. So
okay, we'll say bye to Peaches the bird, and then
you know what? I'll let her play around. That's fine. So,
super.
Yeah. Otherwise,
so Jeff,
she may just be calling.
Jeff, while we're walking, somebody has just asked a question whilst we're navigating. It's Philodendro. They've just said, what is the most rewarding plant that you've cultivated or hybridized, we'll say?
Good question.
Maybe it's Michelle, your wife.
No, not necessarily. You say rewarding. You get rewards in all different kinds of ways, Mark. And one way might be is something lucrative. Okay, so there's one as far as a cash evaluation for it. Others are things, though, that are being lost from the wild, and that if you had to think about it the way I sometimes approach plants in medicine, is that with deforestation and with so many of those original skeletal molecules coming from the ingenious ways that plants basically are the things that are coming up with the ideas that we find use of as medicines. And there's loads of examples. I guess you could go back even several hundred years ago where you are in the UK, through Kew, they had people exploring the New World, even through the Amazon basin, and coming back with cinchona bark. Cinchona bark, why? Because as good as it is now, the Thames was a cesspool for malaria a few hundred years ago in Dickens' time. So, you know, if you think about the importance of plant chemicals that may have been discoverable in some of those places in, say, South America rainforest or other rainforests throughout the world, there's a certain interest I have to collect as far as the tissue and the genetics of certain rare plants. Not that I'm collecting only botanical medicines, but that's one way of looking at it. Another way are from things that have not yet proven themselves to be able to be cultivated in some areas of the world that I think are helpful. A little while ago when the camera was roaming around, you may have seen a picture or a view there of a palm that had red stalks on it. And it's called the red sealing wax palm, Certostachys renda. And that's a relatively common palm if you're going in Central America, some places south. But Miami, as nice as it is here, and I told you about the temperature and humidity, is pretty much not had success with that particular plant because of where we are. So that's another example of a plant that I would like to culture here. And one of the more rewarding plants that plant is, because within the last several months, I not only grew a specimen here over 25, 30 years into flowering, but took seeds from that flowering rare palm, planted outside, that's key, and were able to germinate those seeds. I took a piece of that palm and shared it with a local botanical garden, Montgomery Botanical Center, that features their work in research, in particular with palms and cycads, two other plant families that, again, I'm giving you the rewarding comment because those are plants that otherwise have heretofore not been successfully cultivated in the continental US. So that has a certain reward as far as choosing that. The ones that reward me the best are the colorful. Go ahead.
I was saying, so you're cultivating, not only do you have a collection of plants, but you are actually actively cultivating, because you mentioned bromelia before, anthurium, and you've just talked about palms, and is it cycads?
Cycads, yeah, they're even more prehistoric than palms. They're conifers. They existed before flowering plants.
So this is, I don't know, this is a life hobby, isn't it? A life balance between, are you an active doctor as well, physician right now, and you're doing all this botanical work? Or is it just all, are you just botanics now?
Well, I'd say that more of my time and focus is on plants and medicine rather than direct patient care. I spent 25 years as a clinical hospital-based anesthesiologist, safely putting patients to sleep and then actually getting paid for waking them up. There's the payback. But right now, at this point in my career, I don't practice clinical anesthesiology, although I remain board certified. I have hospital privileges in our local hospitals. I have a university affiliation at the Medical School of the University of Miami. I stay involved with medicine also, having served as the past president of our medical school's alumni association, of which I will celebrate actually in March next month, the anniversary of my 40th graduation year and a reunion. So I do these kinds of things to stay active with medicine, but do not do direct patient care at this stage of my career. I am involved, though, with botanical medicines, even including one that is very probably misunderstood and vilified, but actually may have some very important work ahead, and that's cannabis. It doesn't mean I think that cannabis is something that's good for everybody, but cannabis is a plant that identified a receptor system in us, and that is responsibly named then the endocannabinoid system. But think about other plants a minute, Mark. Opioids. Now, they get sort of a bad name now because of overdose deaths, but believe me, as a way to relieve pain, that is a noble cause that physicians have done for hundreds of years. It comes from the opium poppy and the derived chemicals from the opium poppy, morphine, and that defined endorphins, which is a receptor system. Even the chili pepper, you want to talk about plants, defined in the 1990s, another receptor system called endovaniloids. And those are the ones involved with heat sensation and certain pain management as well. So whether the chili pepper, the opium poppy, or cannabis plant, they're what are the source chemicals in plants that allowed us to discover receptor systems in human beings. All the three that I've just named are essential in pain management. So plants do have their application, again, biochemically, to who I am as far as my understanding of health and wellness, not only of plants, but people.
Chilies and peppers, I hadn't even thought about other than food to consume, really. The other ones that you mentioned, yes, I'm aware of. We are getting quite a lot of questions now about people who are new into sort of aroids care, hybridization. I don't know whether you want to answer some of those questions or it steers into a different direction right now, but there are quite a lot that...
Good. I've got a comment about hybridization because I had mentioned that I've done things generationally with these plants that is not simply one cross and just see what comes out. When you do things generationally and you pick which particular seedlings from that cross are going to be featured for the next generation, it's not only what the front of the leaf looks like, Mark, or you mentioned the back of the leaf. Yes, those are features that most people think of that a hybridizer would be trying to accomplish fine tuning. There's something else that's important that's sometimes overlooked, not by the hybridizer, but by the general public. When I pick seedlings from one generation, and it may be 5 years apart before the next generation's product's available, I also pick for how well they grow. So I'm not picking up the one seed out of a batch of several hundred that comes up the slowest, or the one plant out of hundreds or thousands that is the smallest little runt of the litter. I want those that perform well. I want those that are robust growers, and I select for those. So when people tell me, gee, I've tried growing other anthuriums, Doc, but the one I got, that's the one you've been working with, I grow that without any problems. Doesn't mean it's going to tolerate being freezing cold. It just means genetically, they're studs. They really do perform at a different level when selected for that trait, because it is a trait. It's just not one you see.
That's a bit of a realization moment, because obviously from me liking anthurium, I'm essentially looking at them. I hadn't thought about the fact that people like yourself are creating them to the best of their quality, almost like sportsmen or women or something like that. So they're more than just the look. They are tough and strong.
And I have the benefit of something you haven't quite gotten yet because of your youth, the time. So when you look at something over enough time, that's where the plants can speak with you also. And it's not just the same plant getting bigger. It's time when you're including in successive generations. That's what plants are trying to do. Remember, the chemicals that are in the plant, the way it interacts with its environment, whether it's a human being or a pollinating bee, the plants are very sophisticated in getting us to do what they're doing, what we're doing for it, in order to secure the plant's own survival. So most of the things that plants are trying to do are things that ensure its own survival. So it's not just growing the plant now, but at the point it gets to flowering, the plant's trying to say, how am I going to reproduce myself? Is it going to be from lots of seeds the way nature intended, or that very slow, after many years, one offshoot that comes off of the base of an anthurium? It's still thinking like a plant. And I think the best growers I know and the best people who tend for plants, and please don't take this as a weird conceptual thing, you got to sort of learn to think like a plant. And if you do that from the plant's perspective, then you know what to look for, not only in terms of treating a problem when it occurs, but what the plant's purpose is in the world. Why is it there? What would it like to do? And if it's able to withstand the stresses of nature, the plant survives. In a sense, if it can't withstand the stresses of nature, global climate changes, too much water, unfavorable environments, ultimately, the big consequence of that is plants that can't withstand, or animals, the consequences of nature become extinct. And I think these plants are so beautiful. I don't want them to become extinct. I want to propagate and share them because they, for some reason, just move me. And I think there's enough people on this call to attest to that.
Yeah. There's one somebody's asked a question. I think it's quite an important one. It goes back onto something that you were saying before, and it was in relation to where you were handing out, gifts of the plants that you'd grown in the past, and then people have made things from that. So what they've asked is the people that have gained one of these plants themselves, is it correct that there's some kind of magnificum hybrid dock block? Remove the dock block. Is that what they are? They're some magnificum hybrid?
Well, I think that information may be shared in fairly short order by people who are far more educated on that than I am. The source plant that I started with that got my eye 30 plus years ago and shared with me was not anywhere near as dark or necessarily as good of a grower as what I've developed into Michelle. It had one very rare consequence that developed into Zara, which is qualitatively different. And for those on the call, if you look where the petiole comes out on the front of the Michelle, it almost makes a letter X. I like that, and I realized that was from the original plant I got just for the vein expression of there. The colors, of course, are darker and they are more robust growers. But I did have some evolve into what became Zara, which I shared with people also. And that's what may be out there is Dr. Block, whatever. But that purposefully, I went a different track because the largest of the anthuriums, when I was looking to make the Michelle large, I looked at plants like regale and some of the larger things that people refer to as crystallinum. And a lot of them didn't have that X in the middle. They had, square shoulders. So if you look at the veins on Zara, from where the petiole comes out, it's not an X, it's square right across the top. So you'll see that expression in Zara, which I've developed into featuring not more of the purple burgundy hues like Michelle has, but actually more of the red hues that the plants that are Zara previously that I may have shared with people and they called it Doc Block, those are expressing more reds. But now I'm getting them even more red. And now that plant, by selfing for successive generations, more and more of what used to be a more rare occurrence coming out of those particular early magnificums are coming out with the red genetics that seem to be expressed nicely in Zara. So those seem to be the two most popular plants thus far, but that's the origin of them, or the progeny, not the progeny, excuse me, the provenance. And that's an important consideration because when plants do go into a registry and are officially named in a database that people can say, this is really that plant, it allows you, by citing not just the provenance in a responsible way, but what the plant was bred for, what are the features to look for in it, perhaps who's responsible for developing it to be that way. That's the way.
Is that something that you're looking to do?
Oh, yeah. I've just been a little behind, but especially now that Michelle won a significant award at that Tropical Plant International Expo. TPIE show was held last month in Tampa, Florida. That is an international trade show. And a friend of mine who was growing out my seedlings entered it along with other things he has in a competition. I gave him one of my plants here. It was entered in there, not just in a given plant show featuring anthuriums or aroids, but orchids, bromeliads, ferns, palms, everything is at that show. It was awarded Best in Show for Best New Flowering Plant for 2022. And that's an honor because it means that a well-respected horticultural organization such as this TPIE group that does this annually recognized it as being special. So I've competed in plant shows like for years and years, but not really for about the last 10 or so, because I had won enough awards, whether bromeliads, orchids, things like that. I didn't need another ribbon or a piece of crystal, but something happened that bothered me in plant entries of competition that I want to share with the listeners, because it's not who I wanted to be. I had entered plants in competition as a way to have them judged by people who were far more knowledgeable than I in different plant families. I told you I started with bromeliads. And bromeliads, unlike anthuriums, do pup out vegetatively. They are prolific. They're even known as friendship plants for that reason. So I shared lots of them with friends, other growers, just because that's the nice thing to do. And I say share, give them away. When people who I know started to grow their plants out, and some of them were doing pretty good jobs, and I was waiting for them, say, in the following year's show to enter their plant so they could get tips from the judges, they didn't enter the plant. And I asked them why. And they said, well, they didn't enter the plant because they thought maybe I would be entering the plant again. And that took all the fun out of it for me, Mark, because it either meant that they didn't think they could win if I entered a plant, and that wasn't the spirit in which I gave it to them, or that they didn't want to, upstage me and maybe win something with a plant that was better even if I didn't enter it. And that wasn't the reason. I want people to get involved with plant societies. We have a lot of them here in Miami. And if they do, and they enter something that they are proud of, then they should be able to get the accolades, the ribbon, the crystal, but the feedback from people who are judges, who can give them the wisdom, because not everybody succeeds in it first time, but you do it for a while, you learn what to look for, how to accomplish it, and it becomes sort of a way that can help you get better in not killing the plant. Because if you're going to spend that much money on a plant like an anthurium, I certainly hope you don't kill it. But you know what? People do. And it's not necessarily purposeful. Maybe it's intentional or not. But anybody should be given the right to fail, so long as you learn from it. And so if you want to try to grow it out again or again and again, the big box stores are banking on you doing that to go back and buy another plant, right?
Yeah.
So you want to stop having to buy plants? Don't kill as many. And so
I've learned a lot myself.
Well, okay, well, look where you've got it now. You got a Mylar tent and everything like that, because in the UK, you're not going to put it in your backyard and expect like it will here flourish for you. So it's okay to fail once at a price tag of what some of these plants go for. If you fail twice, you may not want to consider a third go at it if you're going to do it the same way.
Yeah. So there's a question that's just been asked. Actually, I love it because it's leading on to a question that I've written down. So I'm gonna merge them together if I can. So the question is, someone says, does the good doctor, that's you, that's what they're calling you now, the good doctor have a YouTube channel, a podcast, because I could listen to you all day? Now, I'm gonna kind of answer that for you. You do have a YouTube channel, you have a website, you have an Instagram account. So the website is nurturingnature.com. There's information on there that links out to your other socials, but you also have a little shop on there, and there's going to be some items that you're going to sell, but at the moment they're not available.
That's correct. I don't have a YouTube channel per se. I do have things that I've uploaded also on botanical medicine lectures I give, for not just academics, but for the public at large. I would say that the Nurturing Nature website is the interface between botanical medicines and tropical ornamentals. And because both of those have really discussion points leading to health and wellness, I think that there's tremendous health and wellness around the hobby of working with plants. By the way, it's one of the reasons I do it. But those discussions are part of a Facebook group, not so much a YouTube channel. And I haven't developed it much yet. But if people would like to be involved in either or both of those conversations, the Nurturing Nature Facebook group, which is also accessed through the nurturingnature.com website I have, that would be a good platform to get it. And also through that same website.com is where there is an online shopping platform that I sold my first plants of my life in September, and they sold out within 6 weeks. I didn't realize how popular they were. We are restocking and replenishing, and it probably should be in just a matter of the next few weeks before more plants are listed through that website. I do have also Tazula.com has access to the plants, and they've been helpful in terms of processing fulfillment. That's the other thing I want you to know. I myself personally have never fulfilled an order personally, but I've made the plants available to a commercial grower who grows a very fine plant. We've known each other for 40 years. And the plants that he's now turning out from my seedlings, and I'm the developer then, are beautiful plants, healthy grown, and we know when they leave the farm door what they look like. We generally have restricted during the first few months of shipping and only in the continental US, but since your audience is partly UK and abroad now, I'll share that I do also now, we have an international exporter, Arthur Knott through Exotica Exportare, is now going to be able to export the plants once they're purchased here. So we are trying to make the inroads of what's required to share plants globally. And I had to sort of wrap my head around that for a little while, Mark, because when you start them from little babes generationally, and then you realize that the plants that you've grown into looking like something that somebody might want have to have all the soil taken away from it, usually put flat, inspected after being maybe out for several days, hopefully not weeks, but there's something objectionable to sort of stressing the plant to that extent. But there are some exporters who are pretty good at that, just so long as somebody knows overseas after putting the plants through that stress, for God's sake, take it right out of that box and nurse it back to good health. The existing root system in plants should be resuscitatable. Is that putting it in terms like an anesthesiologist would? Yeah, you can actually get these plants to grow anywhere in the world if you have the right conditions. Many places outside of where I'm speaking to you from have to make those conditions provided artificially.
Well, people will look forward to being able to access some of your plants outside of the US through those channels. That's really interesting to know.
So here's what I think we could do. I know you have questions, and I know that Livestream, this is my first with you, but you've advised me ahead that you don't want to run over an hour somehow in ether space doesn't get picked up or shared. So in an effort to sort of get further into the discussion points that those last few questions and answers we're touching on, how do I grow them? What does you look for in breeding? I'm speaking to you from a conservatory area, which is pretty, but how about, I know we talked about doing another one of these next week, same starting time, next Friday.
Yeah.
And there, I can do this from, say, one of my greenhouses, where you'll see specimen plants, but not in the landscaping, but for cultural purposes, everything is on benches within the more secure growing environment of a greenhouse. But I can also, provided my friend cameraman who's here with the camera will move with me, I can also position myself at a workbench, pull out some plants, pull out some media, maybe some seeds or a flower that I can show you how I separate the
people are
seeds
getting
from the
very
berry.
excited about that.
Yeah, see, that kind of thing will, I think, help those people who want to go from what we just did. We just did Botany 101, okay, or Philosophical Plantsman 101. I think, though, that we can extend this talk into actually seeing maybe more current F4 generation things, not to make people say, I want one of those tomorrow. The other thing we can talk more about or even touch on today is that when you see a plant and you see a picture of it and you say, I want that plant. Well, that plant is the only one of its kind, at least so far with anthuriums, because that plant was produced from a seed that represents some of the traits of both of its parents that made that seed happen. So you have an anthurium flower that's a receptive female stage pollinated with pollen from even the same plant. And so that should give you a more reliable plant that looks a lot like the parent or mother plant, but it's never going to be an exact, photocopy of it. It's because that's what the Mendelian genetics does when you cross to get a seed. That's different than cloning. Cloning, and by the way, cloning is what's used in the cannabis world, because you can take a tip cutting off of a little end of the cannabis branch, put it in the ground with some root growth hormone, and get a whole new identical genetic plant to the one it came from. That can't happen with anthuriums, though. That's not the way anthuriums are done. Anthuriums can be duplicated genetically, but that's what tissue culture is. Tissue culture has been used for orchids for decades. And basically, instead of starting from a plant offshoot, tissue culture takes individual cells from that particular parent plant you want to duplicate and turns it into a beaker I could hold in this big, could have 10,000 cells in it, each of which is a genetic clone that can potentially be grown to a genetic equal of the parent plant. That is possible, maybe in the future, not too distant, but for now, most of the rest of the world with anthuriums, and I'm certain that just about everybody on this call is interested in the good old-fashioned way of hybridizing by advanced Mendelian genetics. Take a girl
Yeah.
with a boy, put them together, and even
See
so,
what you get.
well, here's what I want to do to be as transparent as possible. Instead of just showing the picture of a parent I'm trying to get a plant to look like, I just featured a video a few weeks back on Instagram, which showed the whole plant rotating around, front of the leaf, back of the leaf. It's a nice plant. If I showed you that plant and I showed you another plant, even maybe again, the whole plant, and I show you both of those pretty plants and I say, this one was mixed with this. I say, here's the boy, here's the girl. If I show you both ahead of time and you like both of them, how ugly do you think the kids are going to be when the seedlings grow up? So it may not be full disclosure to look exactly like the parent, but that's part of the fun of growing these out. Yours may express one feature you like from one parent or another, and everybody should be happy with the way theirs grows out, because if it's from a seed, it's unique, it's yours. And don't be disappointed if it doesn't look exactly like the parent, because the other variables, including the light we talked about, may make a plant look very different when grown in your place versus mine. That's not your fault.
Can I just jump in, because there's some conversation going on prior to the mention of another session. So we are talking about having another session. We're gonna announce it shortly. But if you want to keep on top of knowing when that session is, please follow both myself and the Real.Block account. And then when we've announced that on our stories, you know exactly when it is. And I think what Jeff was just saying there, it will be a little bit more of an intimate session of how to deep dive or something like that. So I think there was so many people screaming yes 1000% when you suggested that, so I just thought I'll answer that. But yeah, get following us and then you'll know exactly when that will happen.
And just for the listeners here, if this time was convenient for you or not, I know my calendar is set to do this a week from today, which would be the 18th of February, starting at my time is 1 p.m. You in the UK are 6, but whoever's going to look it up can look it up, because I think we put a little countdown on our sites so people will know according to their time zone when it's going to actually happen. So I'm looking forward to that. It'll be a very different venue than now. I could have worn my sunglasses today, but I would have looked a little too mysterious. But we got a bright sun shining on me. It won't be as bright where we're going to be, because the lighting will be more even either in my grow space or my workbench. And then again, Peaches won't be out there with me either to hog the show. So anyway, and we're nearing on the time here, so I'm happy to field one or two last questions if you want to share them or wrap up.
Yeah, sure. Brilliant. Okay, so let's have a look here. Oh, maybe you can answer this one. So somebody's asking about alocasia. They're saying that they're having, do you have any advice on pollinating alocasia? Because they've been struggling with theirs. Do you have any tips or anything that you do with that?
I don't generally pollinate my alocasias. I let them grow out. They vegetatively shoot better for me. And I haven't spent the time or energy to do it. I can tell you I had a cryptosperma that did not come easy. I wasn't able to see it. I've got some nice ones even right behind me in here that we don't have to zero in on. But I like them, but their leaves are not as durable, at least as I find the anthuriums that I grow are. So for that feature alone, if I was going to delve into doing something, I didn't want to be everything to everybody for all these different plants and propagation. While I'm pretty sure I could figure out how to do it, I think the expertise honed over a few decades with anthuriums is a better platform for me. So I think you're going to find better people to answer that particular question than I.
Super. The next question is an anthurium one, and I think maybe we'll round it off there and then keep everyone all excited for the next session that we're going to plan. So this question is about, how do you know if it is even possible to hybridize or cross two types of anthuriums? Is it a
good question.
book that you have, or is it just you learn?
Good point. I guess this is all referenceable if you look it up in different places. But for instance, I have on the ground here around me several Wucherianums, nice long elongated leaves, and very different than the magnificums, generally more rounded, generally in shape. You try to put those two together, doesn't happen. The chromosomal incompatibility, like with certain people, chromosomes, if they're not going to match, is not going to produce a viable offspring. that's one of the issues in trying to use magnificum with walkerianum. So there are limits for what might mix with what. Generally, if you stay within the same species, remember, Anthurium is a genus name, the species in this case would be magnificum, then generally you'll get them to combine with each other. But some are not compatible. I think speaking with experienced hybridizer, Jay Vanini comes to mind, or reading what he has written about different things, that way could be a good resource for you. And but it's a very good point. And again, people have the same way. Chromosomal abnormalities, there's a reason we don't hybridize with monkeys. We're both, you know, primates, okay, as families, but we're not compatible that way. And you can think about anthuriums even as one particular genus that way as well. Does that get to the source of the answer there? Not everything's compatible. I'm not the best resource because I haven't written about it, but there are references.
Yeah. I mean, there are some other questions, but I think we'll save it for the next session where it's a bit more intimate and everything like that, and we'll round it off here, and I can get it saved and upload. People are asking, can they access this afterwards? Yes, you can. I'm going to save it onto my profile page after this. I just got to put a nice little graphic on there. So give me 5 minutes after I've done that, and then that'll be up and ready. But if I can say thank you, Jeff or Doc Block, for this live, it's been absolutely amazing. And thank you, everybody that's joined today. It's been brilliant.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Mark, you're a great host in this. It flows very nicely. So I'm going to sign off now, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes, brilliant. See you later, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.